Hi folks, welcome to Introduction to Sociology. As you already know, my name is Troy Lepper. I'll be conducting this play, if you will, over the course of the semester. So let's get right into it. When you're taking an introductory to sociology course, one of the first questions that you're asked is, what is sociology? The knee-jerk reaction to that question is that sociology is the study of human society. And in some respects, that's correct, but you just can't go out and study all of human society. That's a pretty broad field. So while many sociologists are interested in studying society at large, what they're really going to do is break down society into some manageable pieces and study those pieces, which then in turn might give us an idea of what the larger society as a whole looks like. Some examples of these pieces or subfields within the discipline include the sociology of sports, religion, music, medicine, pop culture, and the list goes on and on and on. If you are interested in seeing some more of those examples, you can look throughout the textbook, or you can go to the American Sociological Association's website and find out where exactly sociology is. Now, over the course of my time with sociology, the most important aspects of sociology always was in reference to race, class, gender, identity. Those are the big categories: macrosociology, microsociology, and then as we get into the main theorists, things like functionalists, conflict theorists, symbolic interactionists. These are how we identify things in our discipline, and the more we break down society, hopefully the more we can understand it as we move forward. One of the main concepts and a very fitting concept for us to start with is the sociological imagination. The sociological imagination was, of course, coined by C. Wright Mills, and it was designed to help us begin to unpack what society actually was in order for us to then understand our place within it. What the sociological imagination does is it connects our personal experiences to society at large and the greater historical forces that we find ourselves swept up in. By doing this, it tells us to understand ourselves, but in order to understand ourselves, we have to place ourselves in the historical context. So, for example, myself, I was born in 1968, so the major time frame that I have existed in has been that historical turmoil that we now know of as the Civil Rights Movement. So what was going on 20, 30, 40 years before I was born that conditions me and my placement in that context, and how has that shaped me over time? Well, most likely it's shaped me a lot. I'm a white male that in many respects believes in giving up his privilege and favoring other groups of folks as being equal to me, not being less than equal. So the historical forces that I was born within certainly have shaped the way I see reality in and of itself. And it's also designed to make the strange seem familiar, or to question the givens that we find within society and within our own understandings of society, things that we see as natural. And a sociologist would encourage you to dig below that surface, to see society as, or the way you understand society at this point, as maybe like an iceberg. And what you're seeing is the tip of the iceberg. And if you were only to see the tip of the iceberg, you would certainly misunderstand the massive volume of that iceberg underneath the surface of the water. And so as sociologists, what we want to do is dive below the surface um, and try and understand what it is that we might not be able to see initially. The sociology or sociological imagination was coined in 1959, and in the mind of Mills, we can't begin to understand our personal lives without thinking about that overall social context. And it's within that social context that we find ourselves and understand ourselves, which then allows us to interact with the social forces that we're swept up within. Another big concept within the discipline of sociology is the social institution. You might ask yourself, what is a social institution? Well, social institutions, from a sociological perspective, are networks of structures in society that work to socialize the groups of people within them. Examples, of course, include the legal system, the labor market, the educational system, the military, and the family. The way we generally think of institutions are that they're stable entities that just are. But the reality is that these institutions are purposely structured. They've been created by someone to do something. Additionally, when we think of the institutions, we tend to think that they've always been this way, which is incorrect. Institutions do change over time, much like the rules of a game. That's really what the institutions are. They're the rules of the game. They're the legal frameworks, the legal and market and educational frameworks that allow us to interact within the larger society as a whole. Institutions are extremely important. We need to understand them more if we're going to understand our role in the institution of democracy in and of itself. Another important concept is social identity. We are going to unpack these terms as we move forward. Social institutions, that's really looking at the macro level of things. Social identity is coming down to the micro level of our existences. What is a social identity? It's the way individuals define themselves in relationship to groups they are part of, or in relationship to groups they chose not to be a part of. So the different groups that you belong to help you tell others about your identity. You might say you're a daughter or a son or a parent. You might say you're a student. You might also identify yourself by saying which group you are not from. You might say, I am not a white supremacist. I am not part of the KKK. Versus, I'm an interacting member of the ACLU. So we construct our identity in relationship to how others see us. And we construct our identity based on who we associate with as well. These are extremely important concepts for us to understand as we move forward in the discipline of sociology. It allows us to kind of place ourselves in overall theoretical frameworks that then can help us understand this complex world that we're looking at and give us some basic ideas on how we move forward in it. To understand the theoretical perspective that sociology brings to the equation, one of the most important social theorists, at least in the early stages, is Auguste Comte. We know Auguste Comte coined the phrase sociology. For Comte, society is better understood by determining the logic or scientific laws governing human behavior. He referred to this as the social physics or positivism. He believed that society and knowledge in and of itself was moving through a series of stages. It started off with the theological stage, and then we moved into the metaphysical phase, and now we are moving into this social physics or positivism, where science in and of itself is going to be used to solve some of the moral conundrums of the day. Science itself was going to create this secular understanding of right and wrong, where we wouldn't have to rely on a religion anymore. We could use scientific law to tease out what is right and wrong and to guide society over time. Harriet Martineau, another important theorist, probably could be seen as the first feminist thinker, or one of the original feminist thinkers, even though Harriet Martineau is not normally thrown into that category. It's not a big stretch of the imagination to see her as a feminist. She was also the first to translate Comte's works into English, and had very far-reaching thoughts on the development of knowledge and the role that science would play in this idea of determining what is right and wrong. She was much more than just a person that translated the works of Auguste Comte. Another important social theorist is Karl Marx. Marx came up with the theory of historical materialism, which identifies class conflict as the primary cause of social change. This is a bit different from Durkheim, where we will see here in a few seconds, who's a functionalist that's saying that social change happens through the functional changes within society, whereas Marx says, no, that's not how social change actually happens. Social change is a historical struggle between those who own the means of production, or the bourgeoisie, and those who don't own the means of production, which is the proletariat. Another important social theorist is Max Weber. He brings in the idea of subjectivity to the sociological milieu, and was the and lays the foundations for interpretive sociology. So we are interpreting behaviors. The world is subjective, and we're just trying to understand what's going on out there. He, in some respects, is standing on the shoulders of Marx. And he adds, instead of just looking at class, he says that there's class, and there's race, and there's status, and other things than just this struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. It's more complex than that. Emile Durkheim, on the other hand, is also seen as another of the founders of positive sociology. Developed the theory of the division of labor, and of course the division of labor helps to determine how social cohesion is maintained, and Durkheim is known as one of the first functionalists and is trying to understand how society continues to reify itself over time. And the last one is, of course, Jörg Simmel, who brings a formal sociology, or sociology of pure numbers. He's looking at groups versus one person versus two person versus three persons, and how the difference in numbers changes the way that individuals will make decisions. And he also went on to formalize many of the concepts that were important to sociology, but had not been written down quite yet.